I'm ready.
Thank you.
Okay, sorted.
Yeah.
My name's Aamer. I'm the lead solicitor for the Scottish COVID bereaved. A short statement which will be followed by the family members. Today, the First Minister of Scotland, Humza Yousaf, offered an unreserved apology to the COVID bereaved over the handling of informal communications such as WhatsApps, whilst announcing an external review into the handling of WhatsApps by the government. The COVID bereaved regard the First Minister's statement as too little and too late. The damage has been done, the evidence has been destroyed, and today was nothing more than a shameful 11th hour scrambling to sort out a mess created by his government and predecessors. Critical evidence was destroyed on an industrial scale. My clients are angry at the circling of the wagons around Nicola Sturgeon, which has meant that the focus has not been on the thousands who died from COVID. It's time that the First Minister, Humza Yousaf, stopped acting like a cheerleader for his former boss, Nicola Sturgeon. He has failed to take control. His government has been dragged into disclosing evidence to the public inquiry on a slow drip feed. WhatsApps during the critical period of the pandemic for the first 8 months of 2020 between Liz Lloyd, the Chief of Staff, and Nicola Sturgeon prior to September 1st, 2020 no longer exist. How very convenient. The Scottish COVID bereaved fought for this inquiry. In December, they watched in horror the evidence of Boris Johnson, who was the Prime Minister for the whole of the United Kingdom, presiding over, in his words, a disgusting orgy of narcissism. Johnson's claim that he saved thousands of lives was a grotesque distortion of the truth. It is throughout the United Kingdom that millions of frontline workers risk their lives without adequate PPE. It is throughout the United Kingdom our care homes were turned into killing grounds for the elderly, treating them as toxic waste, all the while Johnson and his cabinet were living it up at parties. In Scotland, the COVID bereaved genuinely believed that Miss Sturgeon, Mr Yousaf, Mr Sweeney and others, when they told families they would be front and centre, that they would be different. In Miss Sturgeon's words, nothing would be off limits, including WhatsApps. That belief is now shattered. So far, all we have seen is a culture of impunity, of arrogance and contempt. It's time for the selective amnesia to stop. Humza Yousaf said today there was nothing unreasonable in what the Scottish bereaved asked for. Yet instead, over the last few days and few months, the bereaved have been insulted, they have been abused, they have been told to shut up, and they've been attacked for trying to hold our government to account. The bereaved have fought to keep their promises to the thousands no longer with us who cannot speak for themselves, but his government and the former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon's conduct to date begs the question, what have they been trying to hide? Next speaker is Alan Ingalls, who's lost his son Callum Ingalls, aged 34, in Adwell Prison.
The UK inquiry here in Edinburgh is turning into a disaster for the Scottish Government. The ongoing fiasco of missing WhatsApp messages, particularly during the height of the pandemic, it's a calamity for the politicians, and we, the Scottish COVID bereaved, are nowhere nearer what we want, the truth. My son Callum suffered at the hands of an untouchable organisation, namely Adwell Prison. Lack of guidance during the pandemic showed quite vividly how pathetic managers and policies were in the Scottish prison service at that time. I stand here alongside fellow members of Scottish COVID bereaved. All we seek is the truth. Without it, change cannot happen. And that means we can't prevent future Callums, care home residents and hospital patients succumbing to the same fate as our loved ones to COVID-19.
Thank you, Alan. Next speaker is Lee Dodds, who lost his son, Lee James Dodds, aged 32.
Just step forward for us a wee bit. Step forward. Thanks. Thank you.
Everyone lives in there listening to everything, you know, and it's hard to take what happened to my son when they sit inside and don't tell us the truth. They're going about the WhatsApp, every single one of them disappears. They all disappear and they don't know how. We say, so I just went up with this. I was getting bored listening to them. And they just didn't tell us anything at all, but who was to blame? Somebody else. Nicola Sturgeon. Oh, police, subscribe police. Terrible. Disgrace. this is what we go at, but nothing about what happened to my loved ones. There was nothing there for us bar them claiming that they never did nothing and blaming it on other people. And for me, that wasn't good enough for me. For my son, he was only 32, and he was in the assessment unit twice. He got sent home. He had the ambulance out. They never took him in, and the paramedics lied to us. I says, I wanted answers, but I didn't get answers today. None.
Margaret Waterton, who lost her husband David and her mother Margaret Simpson to COVID.
The evidence we've heard thus far, including the woeful apology from our current First Minister, demonstrates that during the pandemic, the rhetoric of the Scottish Government was very far from the reality that we experienced then and we experience now. They failed to act. They failed, in fact, to take evidence, advice from well-renowned, internationally renowned experts, hid behind the empty words of the four arms framework, hid behind the mantra of reserved powers, delaying lockdown in 2020. And it's obvious that ministers and officers of the government have been deleting crucial information which could materially impact on the outcome of this inquiry, the answers that we seek and the lessons to be learned. Their actions, their decisions not to act, have not only broken trust, but tragically cost thousands of lives in this country. Whilst I will forever carry the blame and the guilt for not being able to protect my mum and my husband, I'd ask the former First Minister and the current First Minister to reflect on what they were doing, their destruction of crucial information and evidence, and their plans to reinstate independence campaign when people were dying in our care homes and in our hospitals.
Thank you, Margaret. If you have questions, if you could identify who you are and then who the questions are directed to.
David Ballantyne from the Guerrilla TV channel. You're going to contact Meta to try and retrieve these, the WhatsApp actual messages that have been deleted?
It's a matter for the inquiry to carry out its investigations into what's happened with Boris Johnson's WhatsApps, what's happened with Rishi Sunak, who provided nothing, and also obviously now Nicola Sturgeon.
Aamer Connor from Sky News. Liz Lloyd earlier on said she had absolutely no idea why the messages did not exist from March to September of 2020. Do you believe she is trying to cover something up, and if so, what do you think that is?
Well, the questions that the Scottish COVID bereaved have asked is, how is it that someone would not know whether they deleted their messages, how they disappeared on their phone over a significant period, a critical period of the pandemic, the first 8 months from January 2020 to September the 1st, 2020. Where have they gone? Why have they gone? And how convenient that both Ms Sturgeon's and Liz Lloyd's have disappeared in time. Those are questions that Ms Sturgeon will require to answer when she comes to this inquiry. And of course, there are a whole number of reasons that it could happen. But for the families that are here today, for the families across the country, they wanted to know why, what decisions they took, and the critical point has been this: when did they delete those WhatsApps? That's a critical question that we're asking, because of course we've been asked to prepare a criminal complaint, and it matters because, as Lady Hallett has said on a number of occasions during the course of this inquiry, did you not take advice when you were deleting WhatsApps that there was a public inquiry that was going to take place?
Channel News. Margaret, I just wondered, what are you hoping to hear from the First Minister, former First Minister, when she appears next Wednesday?
We want to hear the truth. We've sought from the get-go to have truth, justice and accountability. We want answers. We want to understand what the decision-making was at the time. And we also want to know from the former First Minister what she was doing, what decisions she was making unilaterally and not involving her cabinet in. We've heard evidence around that potential today. So we want those truthful answers, and for her to remember, she was advised in London by Mr Keith, that she's in a witness box, not a soapbox, when she appears next week.
Sorry, where are you from?